Welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. This podcast is designed to provide momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. Whether you're a pastor, youth leader, ministry volunteer, parent, or student, we want to be your go-to and most trusted resource for equipping and encouragement when it comes to your ministry and leadership influence. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, welcome to another Momentum podcast episode. I'm Eric, and I'll be your host for today's conversation. We're filming live at Momentum Youth Conference, and we have with us Mark Clark.
Hey, Eric, thank you for having me. Hello,
yeah, man. You're a speaker, you're a pastor, you're an author. It's awesome. You're back for year two.
This is a great conference. What you do here, yeah,
buddy.
Just meeting all the kiddos, they're jacked.
As you've been walking around today, students just hijacking you and trying to get autographs. And
No. There were some pictures and stuff though. That was kind of cool. When a teenager wants to take a picture with you, that it's like, okay, the Lord's still working in this generation, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, I'm thrilled that you're back. You're going to be speaking later tonight. So for those listening, we're filming this right before.
It's great.
You do your message, and we'll put the link to the session tonight. We'll put it in the description for the podcast episode here.
Great.
And we're excited about having you back.
Great. Well, thank you.
You were the number one requested. We do feedback.
Stop it.
You were the number one requested.
No. Well, I appreciate that, I think. There was only 12 people that responded, and they were all my family.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So funny. I love it. I always say that's
very humbling.
My
Seriously.
mom listens to the podcast, so I know I have one listener.
Yeah, exactly. She did the one comment.
She
that's
boosts
this
our
is a
analytics.
Great pod. Y'all should listen to this. Changed my life.
Nice. Well, buddy, I'd love nothing more than to kind of pick your brain. You were a pastor for a long time and planted a church in Vancouver, and then you kind of moved down to, I'm jealous, California.
Yeah.
I live in Ohio. I think we joked about that last time.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing is where God has led you for the most of our audience, being in Midwest and East Coast, you are in a more post-Christian community culture than some of our pastors. People in Ohio and Indiana, they're going to be dealing with what you're dealing with now
20 years from now,
in the future. So we'd love just to hear from you as a preaching pastor at Bayside in Granite Bay. How are you thinking through, you preach all over the place, but how do you communicate effectively in a post-Christian world? You've written books on this. You have a new one coming out. Why don't you tell us, first of all, a little bit about your new book that's coming out?
Yeah. So, well, thanks. In February it drops. It's actually available now. You can pre-order it. It's called The Problem of Life. So I wrote, my first book was called The Problem of God. Second book was called The Problem of Jesus. And so it was kind of like the end of the trilogy would be, John Calvin years ago said there are two basic kinds of knowledge that you have to figure out: the knowledge of God and the knowledge of ourselves.
Okay.
And so if the first two books were about God, this one's about us. So it's about the human journey, the soul, longing, suffering, identity, purpose, origins, death, all of the and it's kind of unfolds with 11 things that I just say, do this and you'll actually flourish better. So, prepare yourself for death, master these three things at life, all these kind of things. So it's really focused on the human experience, how to flourish in the midst of a culture that's going to get you to try to not flourish and not find your identity and have no purpose and be sad and all that. So it's the subtitle is called How to Find Joy and Purpose and Identity in the Midst of a Disenchanted World.
Nice.
So it's all about re-enchanting, getting a sense of the transcendent back. Where does that? Why can't we? Why secularism hasn't answered anything?
Yeah.
The anxiety of all of us is at the highest levels it's ever been.
Yep.
Depression, suicide, isolation, all the stuff. Why? The secular story hasn't worked because they've disenchanted everything. It's a soulless story. And so this book is kind of going, what would it look like to have a revolution of the soul against soullessness? So
can't wait. Can't wait to read it. That's awesome.
Yeah, great. You listen to mine on audio, don't you? With my soothing voice in the car.
The audio version is for me.
Yeah.
Double speed. Although I can't listen to you on double speed.
Yeah, that would sound chipmunky.
Yeah, you talk too
I'm already
fast.
chipmunky.
I think it's fun because I lost a bet. I thought your third book was going to be the problem of the Holy Spirit. So
there was a time I was thinking about the problem of the Spirit, and which it would have been kind of a play on like the Holy Spirit as the answer to the problem of the human spirit,
right?
But I thought that'd be maybe a little too Christian-y, so I just problem of life feels.
Dude,
like,
I love it. I love it.
So.
You're fantastic with us.
You're a betting man?
No,
I was just joking. You're revealing yourself to your very conservative audience here.
Yes.
You're going to stop listening.
Yeah, it's fine. I got plus 300 odds on, I don't know.
Oh, there you go. I like it.
All right. So one of the things with this, I want to think through like different contexts. So
sure.
First of all, for like concentric circles, maybe like with your staff, with your team that you get to lead and kind of speak into, when you're thinking about like communicating vision for your church, and then even trickling down to communication for a sermon series that you're going to give.
Sure.
What structure, what systems do you think through? Give us a framework for like how to put that in context.
Well, actually, what I'm talking about tonight sets us up a little bit. So tonight I'm talking about, the two lost sons or the prodigal son story. Tim Keller years ago said, almost every sermon has to call both sons to repent, right?
Yep.
So you're constantly asking the irreligious, secular, person, you don't have God in your life, you need to repent, you're lost.
Yeah.
But then you're also looking at the older brother, the religious brother, the one who's doing all the right things, and saying, you're lost, you're just lost in a different way. And so both of these brothers have to actually come to Jesus. And so in any culture you're in, you could kind of just boil it down to there's two kinds of people in the room.
Yeah.
There's the atheist, agnostic, secularist, thinker, whatever. And you need to speak to them, whether it's a sermon series, a sermon title, a sermon, like whatever you're doing, you have to have them in your mind when you're preaching the sermon. So if you're preaching John 3:16 and you say, for God so loved the world, boom, right there's about 4 words in there that you have to actually explain, which is why it takes me 3 years to preach through a Bible book. Because it's like, okay.
Define your terms.
For God, everybody stop. Who's God? If you're here and you're an atheist, you think he's Zeus. But if you're here and you're a Buddhist, if you're here and you're a Muslim, and over time, what'll happen if you talk like that is those people will start to arrive. If you never talk like that in your church, those people will never come.
No way. That's genius.
But if you talk like that over and over and over again, you will create that reality, because then people are sitting there going, he always is talking to my neighbor. Every Sunday he goes, hey, you're here and you believe this.
You might as well come.
You might as well, hey, why don't you come? Versus if all you do is talk to the audience in front of you, they're never going to show up because, my preacher never talks to my friends about anything.
Yes.
So you're defining God, and then for God so loved. Okay, let's stop. What is love? It's not a romance comedy where you feel butterflies and it's not that. It's this kind of love and this, and then we were his enemies and we weren't doing anything for him, but he loved us and all that. So it's really being able to, whether it's marketing or a sermon series or a sermon, whatever you're communicating, you have to have that younger brother in mind who doesn't care about any of this. The thing about the younger brother is he's not even doubting that God exists. He just doesn't care.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, give me my stuff and let me go on, right?
Yeah.
Right. So like, okay, the hardcore atheist, but there's just the apathetic, I don't care about this person. How do you get them to get really into their affections and make them want it to be true?
Yes.
So now you got to talk about God is not only true, but he's wonderful. He's good. He's beautiful. He's something that should attract you. Your life will be better because he's in it. And I don't mean that in some prosperity way. I mean, it's not that you're not going to die. It's that you're safe in dying.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you can well that up in people, then they'll be like, gosh, I want this God, right? But if you're just like, they're not going to care. So it's the nobody cares. That keeps me awake at night. Person who doesn't care and the person who doesn't believe. So you're structuring everything, you're marketing, all that. Then there's the older brother who's the religious brother. And you got to be able to look at him and say, hey, I know you've trusted in your daily devotions as if they're going to get you into heaven. But what if I've led you there, what I've done is I've done a bit of a bait and switch, because I've got you interested in the word, but you're not connected to the word behind the word. This is what Karl Barth talked about, the big W behind the small W. You actually have to get people not to just connect to the Bible, but the God behind the Bible. And so how do you look at these people, this older brother who's stuck in religion, who claims to his father, I've never done anything wrong, like this coward loser that went off and slept with prostitutes, which, interesting, we only find out, I just thought of this, we only find out that the younger brother slept with prostitutes when the older brother brings it up. It doesn't say that earlier in the story. It only comes out when the older brother says it. He slept with prostitutes, he spent all our money, blah, blah, blah. And he's comparing himself to him, which is what religious people do. Because here's what religious people do. They can always have control because they can go, I'm not Hitler. And you can always find someone worse than you.
Better than,
You can always find someone worse than you. So, so a religious person is going to do that. But the problem is they read their Bible, they go to church, they sing the songs, and they still wake up in hell. Because they didn't know Jesus. They didn't know the Father. So at the end of that story, the tragedy, of course, you know this, is that it's the older brother who's not in the party, which Jesus is saying he never got in. It's the celebrations inside, and he's out, complaining and being a religious. So anyway, so I think everything you do as a church has to somehow infiltrate both of those worlds. And I don't just mean Christian religion. I mean religion in general. You have people who trust in going on pilgrimages, whether they're Muslim or Hindu or Sikh, or whatever, and you got to speak to them. We just did a series right now as a church called "The End of Religion," and it was a title from a book that I read years ago. And the whole concept is like all of this stuff, all the way that all of humankind has connected to the gods for tens of thousands of years, drawn on walls, sacrifices, pilgrimages, all these special days that they set aside. All of this, Jesus says, because of the cross and the resurrection, it's over. There's no more day that you have to here's a special day, you have to do this. And I tell the story about a guy I knew that it says Leviticus 19:28 tattooed on his arm. Okay, it's like a big fat tattoo. It just says the word Leviticus 19:28. And of course, he sees a lot of people, and they say, "What does that verse say?"
Right.
And it's the verse that says, "Do not get tattoos," in the Bible. And so he's had so many gospel conversations where he says, "Don't you understand? This all changed. There was a time where this don't eat shellfish and don't let cotton touch polyester or whatever.
Right.
All this is over.
Yes.
Jesus has created a new reality of grace and truth and beauty and freedom. Don't you want that?" So
I'm gonna get that tattoo. That's fun.
There you go.
That's real fun.
Just get it on your face.
Yes, there you go. I love it.
So anyway, so it's that idea. It's like calling out both of those in your marketing, in your having that filter on everything you're communicating. Whether you're getting up and doing the announcements or whatever, you got to have those people in your mind as you're talking. So
Mark,
anyway.
that's so good. That lens, that filter in which to see everything through, that's phenomenal. When you're preaching, then, what role does apologetics play in how you incorporate that into your message? Like, how do you help those?
So for the first group, it's convincing them.
Right.
For the second group, it's equipping them, and almost like
perfect.
It's solidifying. They're going, like I had a bunch of kids. I did some apologetic stuff this morning, and the breakout. And a bunch of kids came out. They said, "Okay, that was super helpful." Because when I'm sitting with my friend, now I got arguments to use, because I believe it. I can't articulate why.
Yes.
I know the Bible's legitimate, but I don't have historical reference points for why, or I know that, whatever. So I talked to him I said, what is one thing that your friends, they're like, well, they think what I believe is stupid. So I said, look, one of the things you got to do is you got to get them on the defense. You have to make them realize that they have built their life on a worldview that actually is contradictory in nature. So it's not about you playing defense. It's about making them articulate their worldview. So he said, well, what's an example? And I said, well, okay. So most of my non-Christian family would say that it's dumb for me to believe in the afterlife.
Right.
It's stupid. It's a faith position that you believing in heaven and hell. All these things you can't prove. You've never died. You don't know that there's a heaven or hell. So I said, my grandmother passed away a few years ago, and my non-Christian family looked at me and they said, well, at least she's not suffering anymore. And I said to them, well, how do you know that?
Yeah.
And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, how do you know that she's not suffering more than she was? Like, what wait a minute. So you have a faith position.
Yes.
You have a belief about the metaphysical afterlife that says,
yes,
when people die, they go out of existence. But you don't know that.
They're not suffering.
They're not suffering.
Yeah.
They're just dead. They're gone. But how do you know that? You've never been dead.
Yes.
So you have a faith position. And what's your faith position based on?
Right.
Sitting around with your buddies, smoking weed, eating Cheerios?
Yeah.
This means nothing.
Yes.
At least mine's based on a guy who claims some stuff that history even has a hard time arguing that he didn't raise from the dead.
So
and I'm going to believe the guy who rose from the dead versus you and your buddies on TikTok.
Yeah.
So the guy was like, oh, I got to go tell my friend. Because it's kind of just looking at people and going, you're coming at me as a Christian, but you've got to start to realize you're living out a worldview that makes no sense. Atheism literally is contradictory in its very nature. So is agnosticism. So are some of these other religions. And you just get a little bit out of the surface.
Yeah.
And you start to...
Yeah.
So I think that's all part of the articulation of how you do it for both groups. Apologetics helps both groups. Yeah.
What are some questions to kind of help, even in those conversations, to bring that out? To like help understand their worldview and start to see an insight into their perspective.
Well, it's kind of like when you talk to people about like conspiracy theories, right? And obviously, there's different levels of conspiracy. I'm not ostracizing any of your audience.
Yeah.
But like the one thing they say when you're dealing with people who are believing something that's like pretty irrational, is you get them to articulate what they're saying.
Perfect.
And then you say it back to them.
Yeah.
Right, so I don't even want to use an example. I don't even want to use an example. But it's like, so you get to articulate it, and then you say, so what you're saying to me is, we've never been to the moon, and Stanley Kubrick filmed it on a thing, and da-da-da-da. Like, yes. And then they hear it, and they have to say it again, and then they start to question you. So in the same way, when you're talking to people, you're like, okay, articulate to me then, what is the afterlife?
Yeah.
Well, you just disappear. What do you mean? Well, it's like before you were born. Okay, but why do you think that?
Yes.
Who told you this?
There you go. Why do you think that? Where? Yeah.
So make them Dagobah, right?
Perfect.
So evil. Oh, there's too much evil in the world.
Perfect.
For God to exist.
Yes.
Okay. So explain. What do you mean evil? Well, when like terrorists bomb someone.
Yeah.
That's evil.
Yeah.
Why? What do you mean why? Well, where do you think we came from? Well, animals or whatever. Okay, well, animals kill each other all the time. Sharks rape other sharks. When a lion kills a zebra, they don't murder a zebra; they just kill it.
Right.
But you think murder's wrong?
Right.
If we're just animals, man, sometimes you got to bomb some people. You got to get your gene pool into the next gene pool. We're all just surviving. You got to do some stuff, and all of a sudden they're like, well,
I didn't say that.
Yeah, what are you talking about, right? So, so you're getting them to defend and articulate their own ideas when you know that without theism, some of those ideas don't really hold up. So,
okay, how do you do that when you're preaching then?
You do what I just did.
Okay, literally, you talk it out,
create a person.
Perfect.
But you can't. The key is you can't create the person that's like the really messed up, weird version.
The extreme.
You got to go a little more nuanced.
Yeah.
Because they're like,
yeah.
You just no one believes that.
Right.
If you use like the caricature, like I am stupid.
Yes. Do you in that context when you're preaching? Are you pulling from like a conversation that you had with somebody on a plane? You're pulling from somebody in the congregation.
Usually on a plane because I'm so scared on a plane. I just got earphones in.
There you go.
Trying to just make it land.
I like that.
But yeah, a million conversations with everyone I grew up with.
Cool.
My whole family, all my friend group.
Because really, I think for a lot of pastors, the point there is if you're not engaging in those conversations, then you probably don't have a lot to draw on.
Yeah. If you don't have some non-Christian friends, 100%.
Yeah.
And you should be, one of the good things is running your messages past people like that and being like, hey, what do you think about this? Or at least go out and have like some covert conversations and realize that, what they really care about. So
I met a student yesterday that was a high school student who said that he started a podcast and we actually interviewed him on this podcast. and learned about what he's doing. And he said that in one of the things that he's doing is he invited a non-believer, somebody who's atheist or claimed to be atheist, to be a part of his podcast where they're talking about faith and doubt.
Yeah, great.
And he's like, I would just want your perspective.
Yeah.
Well, 2 weeks later, after they released the podcast, the guy calls him and goes, I think I want to pray to receive Jesus.
Right.
Like
Podcast is over.
I'm rethinking this. He's like, he had barely posted it.
Right.
I'm like, buddy, you're doing what so many pastors don't do.
Yes.
They're not willing to do.
Yes.
Run it by them.
Yes.
Run it by, like, hey,
It'll hold up.
You're the guy at Starbucks that you met.
Yeah.
Hey, you said you're atheist. Like, I'm doing this message. I'm a pastor.
Right. Yeah.
Would you come over and
100%.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's great.
That's fun. All right. So,
I had 2 atheists put me on their podcast when The Problem of Jesus came out.
fun.
And they were like post-Christian, grew up in the church, pastors' kids, and have rebelled completely against, and super smart guys. Like,
yeah.
Half the time they talk about like the weight of gravity on Mars and why the whatever doesn't connect with the whatever. I don't know. Anyway, so they interviewed, and one of their questions was like, well, if God heals people and that's still a thing, then like, why don't we see more videos like on YouTube of like arms growing back and people being healed? Like, we see nothing, and anything we see is still like, Bigfoot in the forest, running around all shaky cammed, and I said something that totally took them off guard. I didn't really think it through. I just said, well, maybe he's not. Maybe he's got better things to do in the universe than wake up and try to convince you two that he exists. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, maybe.
What are you trying to say?
Maybe he doesn't wake up in the morning and go, boy, these two skeptics who will find they won't believe, Jesus, like with the twinkle in his eye, even if I rose from the dead, they wouldn't believe. Like, maybe he doesn't exist to get you to believe in. And they were like, I don't even know. They said this right on their pod. They're like, I don't even know what to say to that. They're like, I have no response to this. A pastor's telling me that God doesn't wake up in the morning and think all about me, and I don't know what to say. Both of them.
Unbelievable.
It is kind of funny.
Which does kind of reveal their worldview.
Right.
That they
it's like
still
God
think
should
that
do that at all times.
would think about me.
Yeah, all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. I wish I could think quicker on my feet with that kind of stuff.
But that came from like, when I first became a Christian, I'd just be in the garages with my friend for like 4 years.
Yeah.
30 people just, I mean, I go from being in the garage smoking weed to boom, a Christian, and now I'm in the garage again.
Right.
And they're just hitting me with every question under the sun.
Love it.
And I just got to figure out how to come up with some kind of answer. And I just learned getting people to have to defend their own thing usually shuts down some of the conversation. They begin to go quiet and go,
Do you think that's a muscle that like people have to flex? Like the more you do it, the easier it gets?
I think so.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. How do you leverage technology, social media to reach the outside of the church into your community? Let's just start there. Like, I know you post like clips or you'll use different things.
Yeah.
Some are, I'm sure, probably strategic. Others are like, oh, that made sense. Like, how do you leverage that to reach a community again that's post-Christian?
Yeah, I don't do it super well. I don't do a lot of it, but I see a lot of people on all the social feeds doing great stuff. I'll offer one idea. So at Village, what we did is we had a media guy, and he just realized that people seem to like respond to sermon clips where I'd be like talking about something in culture, and it was from like my weird angle on something, and he'd just be like, that seems to be the stuff that connects. So he said, what if once a month we get in a room and I just show you like a clip from some random thing that's happening in culture, some Joe Rogan clip or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That people are yelling about or debating, and we're going to call it Pastor Mark Reacts. And we'll just film you. It's like a React video. You've seen those React videos. Kids watching, music videos or whatever.
Opening a box of
Cheerios or whatever. So that's what we did. I would sit in the studio, and for like 2 hours, he would just show me stuff, and I'd react to it. And then they would post it, and it would just go, not viral, but a bunch of people would share it and engage with it at a level they wouldn't engage with sermons. So they're already talking about whatever event. Now they have a pastoral commentary on that event. or on, whatever. And so anyway, so that's one way you could do it, just to create some more attraction to people outside the church with questions they're actually asking. So another way is, and this was a bit of a mistake, but it was kind of funny. So we did a sermon series a bunch of years ago. What did we call it? I don't know. Anything Goes. That's what it's called. And basically, we let the internet decide what I was going to preach. And so we just said, you can write in your questions.
Yeah.
Then we'll take the top 10.
Yeah.
We'll post them, and then you guys can vote for them. Okay. And I'll preach on the top 6 or 7.
Fun.
So the series ended up being aliens was the number one voted on thing.
Wow.
There was 5,000 people who voted for these things.
I would not have guessed
aliens, the existence of aliens and what it means. And it ended up being a super evangelistic sermon because it was I got into C.S. Lewis had written a ton about this, about the prospect that there's other planets. And if there are, maybe they're in a pre-fall scenario and the death of Christ, while salvific for them, maybe hasn't applied to them yet. And all this interstellar time stuff. So it ended up being this super evangelistic sermon. And then second was women pastors.
Yeah.
Third was...
That sounds right.
Yeah. Third was transgenderism.
Okay.
Fourth was, can you smoke weed and be a Christian? And fifth was, do you have to be conservative, in your politics, to be a Christian? And then the sixth one was something about prayer. Does prayer actually do anything? Which was a very interesting one. Maybe kind of very new age, West Coast type stuff. So
that's so fun.
So anyway, that's another way you can engage people where it's great. Okay, now you're answering questions. I actually care.
Yes.
Your neighbor doesn't really care about some of the stuff you think he cares about.
Yes.
That you'll get up and preach. The culture. They're
I know.
Whatever. What they want to know is, can I smoke some weed?
Yeah.
And if you talk about that in church, I'll show up.
Yes. That's fantastic. I love that. All right. So take that one step further. How do you encourage your congregation to engage in these things on their own, or maybe develop?
Yeah.
How do you do you do that by is that a specific challenge? Hey, this next week, go find.
I don't do that, but that is a great idea.
Okay.
I try to model, when you're up there preaching, teaching, whatever you're doing, you're not just bringing people to conclusions. You're showing them how you got to those conclusions. And in that, you're equipping them, hopefully, if they're half paying attention.
Yes.
So if you do it enough,
yes,
hopefully people go, oh, I could say that same line and I could tell that same story to my friends and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So hopefully you're equipping them. But certainly there's times to be hey guys, so let's be intentional this week and have this conversation. One of the girls at the breakout said, how can I use this book, The Problem of God?
Yeah.
And I said, well, one of the best uses is buy it for your friend. Then you both read a chapter and you go out for coffee every week and you say, tell me what you hated about the book.
So
what
good.
was complete nonsense?
Yeah.
Let's talk about one chapter a week for 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And it just opens up a million conversations. So
that's so good. Yeah. That's so good. All right, one more, and we're running out of time probably because I know I need to get you back so that we can let you teach these students up here.
I'm excited.
How do you maintain, I guess the statement you just said, how do you maintain your authenticity? How do you maintain your integrity in the message where you're I don't have it. I'm in a dry season.
Yeah.
I'm I'm stuck in the I'm a pastor and I'm stuck in I'm sermon prepping and that's all I'm doing. I don't have the person in my life. We go through seasons sometimes that.
Yes, of course.
How do you maintain your integrity, your authenticity in that season?
That's a good question. I think sometimes you got to be teaching and preaching things that are the right things, but you're not feeling that they are at the time. And you got to trust that God, so one of the illustrations I was just telling a church last weekend was the week I didn't feel like preaching at all, and I walked out and I just preached what I would call a Jonah sermon, I don't even want these people to repent. I don't even like any of them right now. That guy hasn't given in a year. That guy sits in the same seat. He's never invited a friend. So I just walk out and go God hates you, figure it out. And I walk off or something. And then people are
what?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So then, but that day that happened a bunch of years ago, our admin lady walks up. She's like, we have to teach our ushers to lead people to Christ now. And I'm like, why? And she's like, well, I don't know what you said this past week, but more people came to Christ, and they were walking up to ushers, and they're like, can you please lead me to the Lord? And the usher's like, bucket? Right? That's all we've trained our ushers to do, is hand people buckets. And so we had to start training our ushers to lead people to Christ. And you realize in those moments that it's not you. You can go out, and I'm not saying you can go out and read the phone book, but kind of if the Holy Spirit's active and doing something through your weakness.
Yes.
And this is the line that I've been living with since I read it. Charles Spurgeon said, don't bring God your strengths. He already has all of that. Bring him your weakness, because he has none of that.
Yeah.
That's just Charles Spurgeon, mic drop, live your life. You bring the weakness, and then he goes, okay, now I can show up and do a thing.
Man.
You walk in strength, it's like, oh, they're going to think it's about you.
All right, I got to go a step further now because my brain's racing. What do you do when you're like, you've been in the Word, and you're like, it doesn't matter if nobody shows up tomorrow, I'm still giving this message because it's for me.
Yeah.
Do you tell people that?
You want to go one deeper?
Are you authentic? Yeah.
Want to go one deeper?
Of course.
Okay. Check this out. So there's this old preacher. I was talking to you about him earlier today. Daryl Johnson.
Yeah.
Up in Vancouver. He's 75, 80 years old, whatever.
I bought that book.
Good.
Yeah.
So he looks at a group of preachers one time, and he says this: if you prep your sermon and you show up at your church and nobody's there, he said, what would you do? And he said, you still preach it, because the principalities and the powers need to be told that Jesus Christ is reigning and ruling in a world that they don't understand, and they're in the room for it.
That's fantastic.
That changed my life.
Oh my word!
Because you realize
I have goosebumps.
that's what I'm saying. It's like you're not just preaching to you. You're not just preaching it for yourself.
Yes.
And amen. But you're preaching it to them.
Right.
You're reminding them, the principalities, the powers, that they're defeated, and that Jesus is ruling and reigning and coming back. That for me was like, what it added meat to what the preaching moment is.
Yeah.
Like, what is this moment? Are we just out there?
Yeah,
This is like a sacred where the veil becomes thinner for everyone in the audience, and it's your job to kind of make that real. You know?
Mark, that's so good. That's such good perspective, because I think so many times as pastors, as communicators, you're like Sunday, 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 Easter, Sunday, 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 Christmas. And you kind of look back, you're like, hey, team, how was that? But you don't really care because you got another one coming.
Next series, you got to come up with a new logo.
And how do you communicate Christ's death and resurrection again? And so you're like, it gets routine and rote. And in our world today, if we're being totally candid, social media, the comparison, the like, their church is bigger than our church, all that stuff plays into our perspective and mindset. And it's unhealthy.
Very.
And you forget about what you're really doing in the first place.
Yes. And to that point, I've noticed this generation, you know, you asked about authenticity. That's what they want.
Yeah.
Like if you get, like we were doing, like I said earlier, 3.5 years in the Gospel of Matthew. The title of the series, you ready for this?
Gospel of Matthew.
The Gospel of Matthew. It's like, right? It's like these people don't care.
Yeah.
Like they're not, entertain me, give me another fun little sermon title.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this generation wants the real thing. Now, it doesn't mean you can slog and do a bad job. It means you need to try to get a 10 every week. It just means you can do it right from the text, and at least they trust what you're saying because it's from the text versus something you're just,
Mark,
so
thank
you.
Thank you
for having me, bro.
This is awesome.
Appreciate it.
To our listeners, if you have other questions, if there are things that we can help support and encourage you in any way, shape, or form, that's why Momentum exists. We want to help you. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Be sure to check out Mark's session. We'll link to it in the bio. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope you found it to be valuable. And if you did, would you share it with someone else in your network who might enjoy it? Also, would you please go on and subscribe, rate, and review it? That way you don't miss any more and somebody else will be able to find it too. Also, because we want to be your trusted resource, if you have a question or topic that you would like us to discuss on an upcoming episode, send that to us via email to info@buildmomentum.org, or you can send us a DM on any of our social media platforms. You can find us there at Momentum Ministry Partners. Also, if you need more information on our ministry, be sure to check out our website at buildmomentum.org. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next time.